6 years ago, I thought I had lost him forever. Every time he smiled, my heart would speed up as if my ribs were a cage too small for the bird inside. To him, I was a friend, his favorite, maybe, but still a friend, and there's a kind of ache that comes from being almost everything to someone except the one thing you want most. I told myself I could live with that companionship could be enough, that I was strong enough to build a life around the space he left unclaimed. Pause twos. When I finally admitted the truth, softly, carefully, as if I were unwrapping something fragile, I watched his face. I saw the tiny flicker in his eyes, the kindness there, the carefulness. "You're my best friend," he said, and he meant it like a gift, like a promise. I don't want to lose that. The words were gentle, but they shattered cleanly, like thin ice on a winter puddle, beautiful in the moment it breaks. I nodded. I said I understood. I went home and lay on my bed in the dark and tried to negotiate with my own heart. Life, as it does, kept moving. We ended up in a big, creaking house with 3 other friends. The place had cracked white molding around the ceilings, a staircase that complained under your feet, and a kitchen that always smelled like something warm: garlic, butter, toasted bread, old coffee. In the mornings, the sun pooled on the dining table, catching dust in the air like confetti. At night, the living room became an island of laughter and bowls left half-finished on the coffee table. He and I were good at living together. We settled into a rhythm without trying. I cooked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He washed dishes afterwards, sleeves pushed to his elbows, a damp curl of hair stuck to his forehead. We grocery shopped like a married couple, bickering about brands and then splitting the bill. He made me tea when I worked late at the kitchen table. I left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror when he had an early morning. "You've got this. Remember your presentation." There's a loyalty that grows in small rituals. The way he'd tilt his head to listen fully when I talked about someone who had ghosted me. The way I learned the shape of his laughter, the version that meant he was truly amused and the polite one he used when a joke didn't land. He told me about the women he dated, carefully, respectful of my feelings without naming them. I told him about men who were good on paper and then, in person, felt like a chair you sit in at a stranger's house. Fine, technically, but never where you'd choose to spend an evening. Pause twos. We had our other roommates, of course. There was the one who played guitar badly, but earnestly. The one who baked and burned things in equal measure. The one who collected houseplants and whispered affection at them under her breath. On Friday nights, we sometimes dragged the kitchen table against the window and made pasta from scratch. Flour powdered the counters, our hands, the surface of my phone when I tried to take photos. He'd stand behind me and spin me in the middle of the room when a song we loved came on. I let myself have those moments. I folded them and put them away in a drawer I never opened unless I needed to remind myself I was happy. Then the world changed. Lockdown came like a curtain fall. First a rumor, then a rule, and then it was just us, always us inside those walls. Sound, city hush, distant siren. The house shrank and the days stretched. We learned each other's afternoon faces, the ones we wore when boredom made our shoulders heavy. We discovered new rituals: balcony coffee, mid-morning stretch breaks, recipes we'd never try again. He taught me how to make omelets without overcooking the middle. I taught him to fold fitted sheets, which, frankly, felt like a miracle in dark times. There was a roommate I stumbled into around that time. It started with 2 bored people passing a bottle of cheap red back and forth, a movie we'd both seen, a familiar joke made new by how quiet everything felt. It wasn't love. It wasn't meant to be. It was human warmth when the world outside had gone cold. We were careful, kind, temporary. When it ended, we folded it away, a postcard from an odd year. When Frankie found out, he teased me. "You and him didn't have that on my bingo card." He smiled, and I smiled, and I tried to read the micro-expression I wanted to see. Maybe there was a flicker of something like surprise. Maybe there wasn't. One could be a funhouse mirror. It stretches and distorts until everything looks like a sign. 3 years passed in that house. I dated a man who owned more shoes than I did. He dated a woman whose laughter sounded like wind chimes and whose texts were somehow both poetic and exhausting. We started celebrating holidays together by default. Me at his family's Thanksgiving, where I learned to love canned cranberry sauce because his grandmother swore by it. Him sitting beside me at a summer barbecue, making sure I had water and sunscreen and an escape hatch when my cousin tried to set me up with a coworker. Somewhere along the way, my feelings softened at the edges. The dull ache turned into a tenderness I could live with. I stopped building futures in my head where he and I finally decided to try. I started thinking of him as permanent in a different way, not a someday romance, but a lifelong friend. It felt like healing. It felt like proof I could love someone fully and still let them be exactly what they were willing to be. Then came a phone call. Sound, phone vibrating. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where sunlight makes the floor look like a gift. I was halfway through making soup. "Hey," said a voice that wasn't his, and the tone made the ladle slip in my hand. He'd had a scare, an ambulance, a hospital room that didn't have answers yet. I grabbed my bag, my mask, my keys, and ran. Hospitals all smell the same to me. Antiseptic and humming machines, coffee that somehow tastes like a memory of coffee. I sat in a corridor under a light that hummed a persistent, ugly note, and I thought about the exact shape of his hand around a mug, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the little line between his brows when he tried to remember a word. Sound, hospital beeping low. I thought about the time he drove 20 minutes at 11 p.m. just to bring me a charger because my phone had died at a friend's place and I couldn't call a ride. I thought about the time I got sick and he stood outside the bathroom door passing me Gatorade and bad jokes through the crack. And I thought, if he doesn't walk out of here, I won't know what to do with the rest of my life. He did walk out. Hours later, tired and shaky, but alive, the kind of alive that makes you whisper thank you to anyone who might be listening. The scare wasn't as catastrophic as it could have been, but fear is a translator. It turns whatever language you've been speaking together into the truth. We went home, carefully, quietly. The house was mostly dark. In the kitchen, the soup I'd abandoned had cooled and skinned over. We didn't turn on the big light. We sat at the table in the gray, familiar dusk. "I was so scared," I said. The words left my mouth before I could pretty them. "I didn't know how to sit in the world without you." He didn't say anything for a moment. His hands were on the table, palms flat. I had never realized how much I loved his hands. Then he looked up, and there was something new in his face, an openness that wasn't the careful kindness he'd always given me, but a vulnerability like an unlatched door. I realized the same thing. He said, voice rough with exhaustion and something else. "I don't want to lose you." Not like that, not ever. If life were a movie, maybe we would have kissed then, framed by lamplight. In real life, we were both too tired, too rattled, too aware of how big the next step would be. What we did was simpler. We reached across the table at the same time and threaded our fingers together like people who had done it 1,000 times and somehow never at all. We decided in that not quite midnight space to try. Not to promise forever. Not to define everything. Just to try. The next weeks were a strange, shimmering liminal space. We told our roommates first, awkwardly, stumbling over words like we and together as if English had become a new pair of shoes. There was a cheer from the staircase. Finally, from the plant whisperer, a round of takeout on the floor because no one wanted to cook and everyone wanted to celebrate. And then, quietly, we started building a new home a short drive away. A small condo with a north-facing window and not enough closet space. Moving was like shedding a skin. We wrapped our lives in newspaper and bubble wrap. I labeled boxes with a system that made sense only to me. He insisted we could carry the couch without help. We could not. The first night there, we ate pizza on the floor and drank champagne from mismatched mugs because the wine glasses were somewhere in a box labeled kitchen fragile maybe. At first it was awkward in ways that surprised me. We had known each other's sleep schedules, grocery lists, favorite brands of toothpaste, but intimacy is its own language. The first time he reached for my face with a softness that meant I'm going to kiss you now, something in me flinched and then melted. We laughed into each other's mouths like teenagers. The first, "I love you," came on a Tuesday, ordinary as dish soap, and somehow that felt perfect. We learned, slowly, what it meant to be lovers as well as best friends. It wasn't always graceful. There were days our schedules scraped against each other like misaligned gears. He was messy in particular ways. Piles of mail, shoes that migrated toward the door like driftwood, while I liked surfaces cleared, lists checked. I cried once, in frustration, over an unwatered basil plant. He looked stricken, then apologetic, then helplessly amused. "We are absolutely fighting about a herb," he said, and the ridiculousness saved us. But underneath the small frictions, something easier grew. The way we could communicate without performing, the way we offered each other the benefit of the doubt as a default setting. We didn't keep score. We tried to notice the work the other person did. He took my car for an oil change without telling me. I refilled the soap and changed the sheets before a long week for him. Every so often, we'd scroll through old photos of the house, of the version of us who had cooked pasta and danced and pretended we were only that. We'd squeeze each other's hands and say little prayers of gratitude to the people we had been. After about a year, we sat down at the tiny dining table we'd finally bought and had the conversation most couples dread. "If we want this to last," he said, "careful, brave, I think we'll have to work at it on purpose." He meant therapy. He meant unlearning some patterns. He meant that love can be a garden if you treat it like one, watered, weeded, not just admired through the window. I felt a flicker of fear, like he was about to hand me a list of my failings. Instead, he offered something else: curiosity. What did I need? What scared me? What did I shut down? Could we build a place where it was safe to say, "I'm not okay today," without anyone trying to fix it too fast? We found a couple's therapist who had plants in her office and a laugh that cracked tension open like an egg. We learned words like repair and assume good intent. We practiced saying, "Can we pause?" when spirals started. We learned to ask for a do-over when the first try came out wrong. People like to say, "We never fight." It sounds like a boast. It isn't. It's just that we've gotten good at finding the words before the silence gets heavy, at noticing the early warnings. Sometimes it's as small as him saying, "I'm prickly today, it's not you," and me choosing to believe him. Sometimes it's me saying, "I need you to tell me it's okay, I forgot that thing," and him saying, "It's okay," like a warm hand. We got a cat. It wasn't part of a plan. We were just supposed to look at the shelter, which is like saying you're going to look at sunsets but not feel anything about them. She chose us by climbing onto his lap and purring like an idling engine, then putting a paw on my wrist like a tiny, soft blessing. We named her after a poet because we are those people, and she rules the household with benevolent tyranny. We started taking small trips that felt like writing our names together on a place. A weekend near a lake where the wind folded the water like paper. A city we'd both wanted to wander since college. A friend's cabin where the stars came down, so low we could have sworn we heard them hum. We weren't extravagant. We were intentional. We looked for bookstores and diners instead of museums with entry fees we couldn't justify yet. We learned the particular joy of splitting a piece of pie and disagreeing cheerfully about whether the crust was perfect or just fine. This is the part where I tell you about the day we planned a weekend in New York. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind that makes the whole city look like it's been washed clean. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, the cat draped over his shins, laptop balanced on a pillow. I was at the table with a notepad because I am a paper person in a digital world. We could see a show, he said, eyes bright. We could walk the High Line, I said, because I like pretending we are in a movie where people have time for long, artful strolls. We made a list that was mostly coffee shops and parks. We ordered dumplings. We practiced the subway map like we were studying for an exam. I don't mean to make it sound like everything turned into cotton candy. We had tired days and anxious nights, moments when we missed our old group house and the way laughter rolled down the stairs, moments when I felt a pang about the path not taken. Children, a yard, a version of him and me that started sooner. But grief for one life doesn't cancel gratitude for another. We learn to hold both gently, the way you hold a box with something fragile inside. There's scenes that live in me now, permanent as photographs. The night I came home late from a deadline and found the sink empty, the counter wiped, a plate covered in foil in the fridge with a sticky note, "Eat me, please." The morning he had a tough meeting and I ironed his shirt, slow and careful, as if smoothing the cloth could smooth the day. The afternoon we sat on the floor and cried together because the news was heavy and the world felt too loud, and we realized that being safe with each other wasn't about fixing anything. It was about not being alone in it. And sometimes I think about the earlier version of us, the one who stood in a dim kitchen and said, "I was so scared." The one who replied, "Me too." There's a tenderness in that memory that feels like a hand on the back, guiding, steadying. We didn't rush redemption. We didn't declare a new era with fireworks. We learned to love each other in the very ordinary way that real love requires. One dish, one apology, one shared joke, one quiet evening at a time. People like to give rules about love. Don't date your friends. Don't risk what you can't afford to lose. I believed them for a long time. Maybe they're true, sometimes. Maybe they save people from a brand of pain that can bend the spine. But there's another truth, too. Sometimes the safest place to set your heart is in the hands of someone who already knows how to hold it. Sometimes friendship is the scaffold, and love is what you build when you climb a little higher. I used to think I'd lost him. I used to think that saying best friend was a consolation prize I had to learn to love. Now I know I hadn't lost anything. I was waiting, and he was learning, and we were both growing toward a language we didn't know how to speak yet. So here we are, a cat between us, a map of a city we haven't walked together yet, two mugs cooling on a table that finally fits our lives. We don't fight, we talk. We don't avoid, we approach. It isn't that we never break. It's that we learn how to mend without leaving sharp edges. And if you ask me now what I believe, I'd say this: love is a decision you keep making. It's not lightning. It's a lamp you turn on every night, even when the room seems bright enough without it. Do I believe love can be born out of friendship? I do. I believe it can grow quietly, like ivy that learns the shape of the wall, and then one morning you realize the wall is beautiful because of what's grown on it. I believe it can survive the awkwardness of first kisses and the weirdness of learning a person you already know. I believe it can hold the weight of a hospital corridor and the lightness of a cat purring on a rainy afternoon. And if you, listening, are standing where I once stood, loving someone who calls you by a smaller name, know this: it's okay to choose friendship. It's okay to step back and let your heart learn to breathe. And it's okay, when the moment comes and the door opens, to step through. End of part 1. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.